just because I spend most of my waking hours thinking about wine, thinking about how I can deliver a more enjoyable experience through our winemaking. We try to take care of every single detail that goes into making a bottle of wine, including the storytelling, so we can give you an experience that goes beyond just opening a bottle of wine and enjoying it. A winemaker, if you're lucky enough, 40 vintages, and every vintage is like a new opportunity to improve upon your craft. It's like trying to perfect a dish. If you're a chef and you're trying to perfect a dish and you have only 40 tries.
Today, we're going to talk to somebody who does so much work in wine, so deep in wine. Juan Muñoz-Oca, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me so much.
What's the most important message you'd like to share with our audience today?
I would love to tell you and the audience the story about our wines, the stories that decorate our winemaking. We make wine in 3 different states in the United States, 3 different wineries. But behind those 3 different wineries and those 3 very different terroirs, there's the story of an amazing family that has been making wine since 1385, and I think that's a worthy story to tell.
Can you give us some chapter headings to this story, or just a bit of a scope, if you will, about the families and the terroirs that we're going to be dealing with?
Of course. The Antinori family, based in Florence, has been making wine since 1385. We are now in the 26th generation. Actually, half of the 27th generation, it's working at the winery. 25th generation, Piero Antinori, I feel, has been transformational for the way in which the world perceives Italian wine, and transformational for Tuscany, as he single-handedly developed Super Tuscans as we know him today. So I think a very influential figure in the wine world, a very influential family, but a very transformational to generations. 25th generation led by Marchese Piero Antinori, and then 26th generation led by his 3 daughters, who are incredible. And I love the fact that we run a very successful, historic, and iconic wine business, and it's run by by a team of 3 sisters, which is lovely. So that family then branches out into the world, led by Marchese Piero's curiosity, and they find themselves in the United States, more specifically in Napa, and they settle in a beautiful property atop Atlas Peak that we call Antica Estate. These are 550 acres of pristine vineyards atop Atlas Peak, and Marchese Piero builds a winery and immediately starts getting connections around the valley and strikes a lovely friendship with Warren Winiarski, who was the founder and owner of Stack's Wine Cellars, the winner of the Judgment of Paris in 1976. Also iconic and historic on its own right. And when Warren was ready to retire from the day-to-day of running this beautiful property, his first phone call was to Marchese Piero, and he said, "Piero, could you take over the legacy of Stack's Wine Cellars?" Marchese Piero was not quite ready at the time to take over, but I think he promised his friend, "Listen, I'm going to go into a partnership right now, but then at some point this will end up being part of our family." That partnership started in 2007 with San Michel Wine Estates, which at the time was the importer of the Antinori wines into the US, and just ended last summer when Marchese Piero fulfilled the promise to his buddy and took full ownership of Stack's Wine Cellars. So now we found ourselves with 2 wineries in Napa, Antinori Napa Valley atop Atlas Peak. This is the property that brought the Antinori family to the US. And then Stack's Wine Cellars in the valley floor, of course, the Stack's District AVA, iconic and historic winery in Napa. And because that wasn't enough, this summer in 2024, we took full ownership of a winery that has been a partnership between Antinori and, once again, San Michel Wine Estates up in Washington in Red Mountain. The winery is called Col Solare, and Col Solare sits atop Red Mountain AVA. We had a joint venture, and we took full ownership of Col Solare this summer. So those are the 3 states that we manage in the United States. We also set up an importing company. So we self-import the Italian and Chilean portfolio of the Antinori family. Just some of the most beautiful wines made in Italy and Chile. And so our commercial team gets the privilege of selling that imported portfolio alongside the 2 wineries in Napa and the winery now in Red Mountain, Washington. So incredibly influential family, and they were spending a good amount of energy and time developing just 3 beautiful properties in the US, and a commercial arm that will articulate the stories behind all the wines that we make in Italy.
So to summarize that to such a simple degree, tremendous history and truly global epic scale around the world. So someone who just joined this conversation, who might be overwhelmed, let's go back to who you are and how you became part of this.
Yeah.
So other than being a wine lover, the phrase I love is you I guess called yourself stupidly obsessed with wine. So let's talk, Juan Muñoz-Oca, let's talk about what are the misconceptions about wine that you wish were different? What, with your knowledge, what do you want a common winemaker to understand better about wine?
I think in whatever is that tickles your fancy, whatever you're into, food, film, fashion, literature, whatever that you're into, you enjoy spending time learning more about it, discovering new artists. If you are lucky enough to have a musical ear and you play an instrument, you spend time developing your relationship with that instrument so you can master the craft of playing that instrument. Wine is not different. I describe myself as stupidly obsessed with wine just because I spend most of my waking hours thinking about wine, thinking about how I can deliver a more enjoyable experience through our winemaking. I just think about it as a craft that we do that has an end, and that end is the experience of you opening a bottle of wine to celebrate something special, or having one of our wines at a restaurant when you are taking your significant other out to celebrate an anniversary. And I think in order for us to deliver a wonderful experience, we have to know every detail that goes into creating that experience, from growing the grapes and making the wine, all the way to articulating the storytelling that decorates the wine, because that's part of the experience. As a young wine lover, and more now so that I work for an Italian family, I remember hearing like hundreds of times people told me, I spent some time this summer in Tuscany and I had this like very inexpensive Chianti and it was stellar. And I came back home and I bought the same wine. It just doesn't taste the same. And so the question for a technician is, those wines don't travel well, or why is the wine, or do they keep the good stuff in Italy and they send to the US stuff that is not great? And my answer is always decorated by the chuckle. And the answer is, you're like simply not in Tuscany anymore. You are now in Toledo, Ohio, and you're working. You like went to work this morning, and the Tuscan sun is no longer decorating your afternoon. And so it's cloudy, maybe it's raining. It's the context. And so I think we try to take care of every single detail that goes into making a bottle of wine, including the storytelling, so we can give you an experience that goes beyond just opening a bottle of wine and enjoying it. So I think
I,
that's the genesis of being obsessed with it. Like if you are into the details, it's like in Formula One Grand Prix, the winner, it's just like a fraction of a second faster than number two. And I think the little details matter when you're talking about a fraction of a second. So, and the only way to get better at it, it's just that's all you think about.
it goes back to being obsessed. I love it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think so much of society is already about social impact and the environment. And I know those are two topics you're greatly passionate about. You're interested in a winery's influence on communities, the social environments. So as we come up on the new year, we're just a month away. In 2025, what are the best ways for a vineyard and a winery to support community and support social environments?
I am early on in my career. I never thought about doing anything other than wine. It just never crossed my mind to, be an architect or an engineer. Um, it was always wine, and it was always clear. And I think early on, I understood that the influence that a winery has um, goes beyond just the pure production of wine as food, or in our case as a luxury item, as an enhancer of experiences. And I understood that quickly because I grew up in wine country, and I grew up in a family that was involved with wine, and I quickly understood that there were a lot of opportunities for people in an agricultural setting that were given to us because of the wine industry. I quickly understood that if I grew up in a place that wasn't good at growing grapes, and I was in an agricultural setting growing potatoes or carrots or corn, I would not have had the opportunities that wine has given me. I find myself 3 decades later living in Napa, working for an Italian-based family-owned company. I find myself having lived in 5 different countries, in 4 different continents. That exposure to the world, I think, is in part a possibility given to an agricultural area just by the wine industry. So I love that, and that it's not only encouraging, it also makes me think about the intrinsic qualities of having wine around. Like what's good about having the wine industry around you. And if you think about how influential winemakers are, we shape the landscape in the place where we are. We are great stewards of the land because our business model depends on the health of the environment where we grow our grapes. So by definition, we take care of the place where we are. We shape the environment. We build these beautiful wineries. We bring people to visit us because people get really into wine and they want to go and see the winery and where you make your wines. I see all of that, when properly managed, as just great additions to a community. And it's not lost on me that a lot of these great opportunities are given to a community just simply because grapes grow beautifully there, and people that are passionate about wine come down to just like set their roots in that place.
You mentioned a moment ago about all the different traveling you've done. Is that work related, wine related, just for fun, a combination of all three? What
Um,
inspired the
a,
movie?
a combination. I think the genesis of bouncing around wine regions around the world um, was just simply trying to understand how people, the tools that people use to express what's unique about their terroir, and then take that back to your unique terroir and utilize those tools in order for you to express what's unique about yours. Experience the different techniques and different cultures was a big part of what I feel the foundational winemaking training. So early on in my career, I moved around just trying to capture that. Those travels took me to Australia. I did 2 vintages in South Australia. Those travels took me to France and Spain, and ultimately I grew up in Argentina, in wine country, and ultimately those travels took me to the northwest of the United States, where I found just an amazing terroir, a group of very talented people making beautiful wines, and my wife, or the person who became my wife, and so became home. But I think the genesis of all that travel was to try to understand how people are articulating the nuances that make their wines unique. So you could create a toolbox that will help you articulate the nuances of the terroir where you are, whichever that terroir might be. It was the Northwest for the longest time. I then moved to California, and then last year I was lucky enough for the Antinora family to invite me to be part of their U.S. operation, and now I use that toolbox to better express what's unique about Napa and to better articulate what makes Red Mountain a unique place in Washington. But then, among all those travels that were kind of work related, there is also this like curiosity and the cultural effect of wine in people. So there's been a lot of travel for fun that also informs the winemaking that we do, or the winemaking that I'm hoping we'll do in the future.
And that's very inspiring. Today we're here with Juan Muñoz-Oca. We're talking a lot about the fact that you've lived in so many legendary wine regions. I'm not going to dare put you in the spot and say what's your favorite wine region. That would be horrible. But what I will ask is, was there any wine region that you had a belief of, and then when you got there, it was special, different, better than you could have realized? If so, what was the region and why?
I love when a wine region expresses its uniqueness through the wines, when the wines from a place have a common thread. There's many places that express this uniqueness very well. Those tend to read like who's who in the wine world, right? Bordeaux, Burgundy, Napa, the Barossa Valley in South Australia, high altitude vineyards in Mendoza, like the Uco Valley. I think they have a common thread through the wines. Priorat in Spain. The beauty of all that is that the work that went to articulate that uniqueness, like all the work that went in previous vintages to fine tune what is unique about the place and how we can express it at its best. I do realize that winemakers are just lucky enough to be at a place in time in which you can just stand on the shoulders of giants, and those giants are everyone that made wine before you. A winemaker, if you're lucky enough, winemaker gets 40 vintages in your lifetime. And every vintage is like a new opportunity to improve upon your craft. It's like trying to perfect a dish. If you're a chef and you're trying to perfect a dish and you have only 40 tries. So a lot of what we do is based on what people did before us, and we try to just like do little nuances, different. What I love is those wine regions, they have done all that homework, and so they find themselves in a place in which they can call this style, this variety, and these nuances are unique to us, and give you a great excuse to drink their wines. I find myself drinking, for obvious reasons, a lot of Italian wines, a lot of Napa these days. I have had a lot of Washington state wines in my past. Because I'm Argentine, I drink a lot of Argentine Malbec. I drink a lot of Sancerre. I love Champagne. I think the one, and all of those are just great examples of how a region can articulate a point of view and a perspective in their winemaking. But the one place that was surprising to me was Tuscany. The depth and elegance of the wines made in Tuscany are just incredible, and it's and their nuance and the history, it's incredibly rich, And I think I intrinsically knew it, but now working for an Italian family that has a few states of consequence in Tuscany, it's been easier for me to get into the details, and the place is just, it's just magic. It's like the perfect combination of everything that makes a wine that much better. It's the weather, it's the people, it's how they feel about wine, it's the food, and how the wine elevates the food, and vice versa. It's like the whole package at Tuscany. It's dreamy.
I think we should use that as a tourism campaign for them, because we're speaking very highly of them, and that's fantastic. It makes me want to go back. Uh, we're here today with Juan Muñoz-Oca. You have dual degrees. My understanding is agricultural engineering, enology, viticultural. Can you share a lesson that you wish more vineyards would participate based on your education? What should more vineyards be doing?
You know, the answer to that question would have been very different just maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And I'm glad that I am at the place that I am today in regards to that answer. My entire technical, I guess, formative years, learning about agriculture, it was all about the plant, taking care of the plant, giving the plant the nutrients and the water that they needed, taking care of having a healthy crop at all times. And over the last 2 decades, I have learned that if you take care of the soil, then the soil will take care of the vine, in our case, because we're growing grapes. And the environment around the vine will be a healthier environment for the vine. And so you don't have to worry as much about, are you going to have the nutrients that you need? Are you going to have a healthy season? Are you going to have the water that you need? The soil will take care of it. And it's counterintuitive because of course the soil will take care of it, right? But as you prep yourself to be a technician, an agricultural technician, and in my case, an agricultural engineer, you look into the inputs that go into creating a beautiful, healthy, and bountiful crop. And over the years, I just changed my tune, and I worry less about what the vine needs, and I worry more about creating a wonderful environment for that plant. And that starts with the soil. So we're building soil health, and we're worrying about the soil and the environment around the vine. And that not only includes soil health, but also animal welfare. We do want animals around the vineyard, not only sheep grazing in the winter to help us with the cover crop control, but also we want native species to thrive, because when the environment thrives, also the vines thrive, and hence the grapes have a richer textural experience for wine drinkers. So that's the one thing that I have been kind of like changing my tune over the years, and one departure from my formative years and where we are today. One of our wineries in Napa is actually Wine Cellars, which is iconic and historic. Was just certified regenerative organic, which is the baseline of organic farming, with an addition of animal welfare, social responsibility. We want to make sure people that work in our vineyards make a living wage, for example, and they're not driving 3 hours to get to work, kind of thing. But also the environment around the plant, and of course the soil health component. So I think looking at the farm holistically and paying a lot of attention to soil is what probably makes resonates with me the most these days.
That's beautiful. And we covered that regenerative certificate Stag Leap's got. I think that was last week, maybe. Was it that recent? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But covered it, and it's so people are interested. And just for one moment, I feel like in the past 2 to 3 years, I'm hearing more and more wineries talking about these things. what I'm not hearing is any pushback. No one's saying we don't want to do it. My understanding is the biggest challenge for some wineries is budgetary. So am I correct that most wineries and vineyards, most vineyards see this opportunity as an advantage, or is there another side to it?
So I think it's two-pronged. There is, of course, a financial impact to be a lot more responsible. But there is also a philosophical approach to what you do. I feel strongly about those of us who spend time in the vineyard, going home at the end of the day and hugging our friends and our kids without having to worry about carrying anything on our clothes that was just sprayed in the vineyard. I think there is a very analytical view of farming that might justify, listen, you don't have to worry about the stuff that we spray on the vineyard. It's all either safe, or we take the precautions needed in order for that to be safe for you. So there is like the financial component of going the extra mile to make sure that we, generations to come, get to make wine in the same pristine conditions that we do today. That's rooted in the philosophy behind our winemaking for the Antinori family. And we've been making wines for 600 plus years. So we do want to make sure that those conditions remain pristine. I think there's value in that. And so we invest and we go the extra mile. But there's also a philosophical, and so my neighbors might not feel the same way that I feel about inputs in the vineyard, right? Chemical inputs, there are precise and very technical. I do see this as maybe a combination between a holistic approach to medicine and just the typical Western medicine, where the doctor will see you and say, listen, take ibuprofen every 4 hours and you'll be okay, versus somebody that will just maybe look at what are you eating. Can we just maybe tweak your sleep and like look at you in a little bit more holistic way? And that is just philosophical approaches and different ways of like seeing life. I think they're both valid. I'm just happy that we are chasing a philosophy that makes the place not only better for us today, which we're lucky to be here, but more importantly, perhaps for generation 30 and 35 of the Antinori family in the next 50 or 100 years.
I think so many of us love understanding vineyards and harvest better and soils. Now we're going to switch gears, if it's okay with you, and talk about the flavor.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, you've had the privilege of tasting some of the best wines in the world. Can you walk me through one of your favorite memories? The wines, the food pairing, what was the celebration? What was the event?
So I feel like great wine, it's memorable. Like it's the wine that you remember. And it's unrelated to where it was made. It's unrelated to the price. It's unrelated to what vintage it was made of. You talk at times with people and you ask them, what's your favorite wine? And they will love to tell you about this like very fancy vintage of this very fancy estate from Napa or Bordeaux, Bulgari. And it's for a reason. It's because every single one of these components inform your experience. Like we were talking about, you're in Tuscany, you have a €5 bottle of wine, and it's fabulous. It's just the environment is making it fabulous, right? So I understand all of those stories. I think for me, the greatest wines are the ones that I remember. The greatest wines are the ones that spark curiosity, are the ones that make me think, oh, what did this winemaker do? What did this viticulturist do, this grape grower do, that I should be doing? And try to understand how those techniques or tools affect their wine, and why was the wine sparking joy and curiosity. I have a very early memory of having a wine from the Catena family in Argentina. It was the first time that I tried a Chardonnay that was barrel fermented. And the difference between a Chardonnay that was barrel fermented and it's just a regular white table wine, which is what I was exposed to in my early years of wine drinking, which started way too early. It was transformative. I'm like, I couldn't believe that, and I couldn't understand where this like textural experience was coming from. And then I was shocked that I had never been exposed to something like that. And so this, like the barrel, the vanilla aroma, the textural experience of the wine, the buttery texture, was all a revelation to me. And I just go back to that memory every time I have a wine and there is a component of the wine that just sparks curiosity. I'm like, how is this guy getting these savory notes in here? How is this winemaker, how is she getting these vanilla tones in this Chardonnay without being oaky or whatever the case might be? I think it's just the experience, and it's, for me, are the ones that are a little bit more intellectual and that make me think. And I'm like happy and content having wine that just enhances my experience. Like I'm hanging out with you and we're having a glass of wine, or we're having dinner and we're having some wine with dinner. I'm happy having those wines. I'll have them all day, but every once in a while, there's a wine that just sparks a little bit of curiosity, makes me think, makes me pause. And those tend to be the wines that I love the most, and the wines that I will mention out next time you ask me. So, what's your favorite A, B, C, all of that?
So now, with that said, do you have any current favorite wines that you're exploring or that you want to share? And if you don't, that's okay. I know you have exposure to quite a lot.
Yeah, I have two wines that have sparked a lot of curiosity lately. They both happen to be wines that we are involved with for obvious reasons. One of them is the 2021 Tignanello from Tignanello State in Tuscany, one of the flagship wines for the family. And I've been thinking a lot about Tignanello because the state is unique. Like the place is this like magic combination of factors that just doesn't happen 300 feet down the road. And that it's when you are so in tune with the place that you understand how to articulate those nuances into a bottle of wine. That, I think, that's magic. When you can capture the uniqueness of a place in a bottle of wine and people recognize that uniqueness, right? The wine is highly acclaimed. I was bragging over the weekend. One Spectator picks the best 100 wines of the year about this time every year. And a wine made from the Tignanello state, those wines, it's been in the top 10 One Spectator 3 years in a row. And so it speaks to the place, and then it speaks to how we are capturing that uniqueness through the winemaking process. And the other wine, I want to bring it home now here. I live in Napa, and the other wine is one of our own. It's Staxley Wine Cellars. We make 3 wines from our estate vineyards. The estates behind the winery are SLV and Fay. Fay, named after Nathan Fay, who planted the first Cabernet in the Staxley district in 1961. But so we make Fay wine from Fay Vineyard, and we make SLV from SLV. These 2 vineyards are right next to each other. They're separated by a little creek that it's like maybe 4 feet wide, and you can just jump from one vineyard to the other. And yet the wines present themselves very differently. And that also captures my imagination on like, how can we find over the last 50 years of winemaking there, how have we just found the right variety, the right raw orientation, and the right way to express that uniqueness
Mm.
I just showed up at Staxley Wine Cellars last summer, so I can't take credit for any of this. But the 2019 SLV, it's ultimately a representation of that. All the work that goes into, you find your place, you find the variety that thrives in that place, and then you show that uniqueness through your winemaking. So those two, 21 Tignanello, 2019 SLV from Staxley Wine Cellars, are perhaps the ones that are sparking my curiosity and that make me think. Every time I have a sip, I think deeply about what got that wine to where it is today.
And I love your phrase sparking curiosity too, because I agree with it, but I love that that's how you think about the flavors you're tasting. And then as we're wrapping up, we're here with Juan Muñoz-Oca. We've talked a lot about wine, we've talked less about food. Do you have a personal favorite wine and food pairing?
Yes, I grew up in Argentina. Anything that you grill for me will make me happy. In fact, I will just have like a never-ending fire going in my house, and I will grill everything, including toast in the morning if I could. Um, and I believe anything that comes out of the grill with a little bit of char and a tiny bit of like a smoky flavor goes amazingly well with Cabernet Sauvignon. I'm liking where Cabernet Franc is going these days. I am like coming around to like the herbal tones of Cabernet Franc that I feel decorate a dish a lot better than just the pure fruit of Cabernet Sauvignon. But either one of those two Cabernet, either Franc or Sauvignon, with anything that comes out of the grill happens to be like my favorite pairing. And it's very inclusive because it could be a wonderful piece of steak, but it could also be veggies for my vegetarian friends or fish for my pescatarian friends. I think that it's very broad. It's not just one dish with one wine, but I think it works. Anything out of the grill with like a robust Cabernet works for me.
Juan Muñoz-Oca. As we wrap up, for those watching and listening, they want to hear more. They want to get to know you better. So whether it's a website, whether it's your social media, what's the best way for the audience to learn more about you and your winery work?
I think if you just follow our wineries or go to the website and check out our wineries, Antinori Napa Valley, Staxley Wine Cellars, which is slwc.com, or coldsolare.com, our winery in Washington. You'll learn tons about our commitment to sustainability, our work out in the vineyard, the work that our winemakers do in order to craft these beautiful wines. Antinori.it, it's the website for the umbrella. That's the website for the family. That will be a wonderful gate that will transport you to Italy, the beautiful wines that we make in Italy. If you want to learn a little bit more about myself personally, I think if you just find me on LinkedIn, you'll get not only a perspective of what I've been and my professional profile, but also there's some blog posts and some videos that articulate a little bit how I feel about winemaking. I don't know who will be crazy enough to spend some time looking into that, but you're more than welcome to do so. I will spend most of my time just trying to learn more about the beautiful wines that we make through our websites.
Perfect. Juan, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for the conversation and letting us get to know you. I really appreciate it.
This has been so great. I cannot tell you. I'll spend all day chatting with you. Maybe we'll do it off camera one of these days over a glass of wine.